Before we get into tonight's case, welcome to Season 2 of The Last Known Moment. Thank you for sticking with this show through Season 1. We're kicking things off with a case a lot of you have been asking about for a long time, so let's get into it. Welcome to Natural Queen 77 TV. The following episode contains discussions of graphic violence, sexual assault, and mature themes. Listener discretion is advised. Please note that the stories covered in this podcast are retold based on publicly available information, court documents, and media coverage. While we strive for accuracy, the true crime genre can be complex, and some details may be subject to interpretation or appeal. All individuals discussed are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. I'm your host, and this is The Last Known Moment, Season 2, Episode 1, The Disappearance and Death of Phylicia Barnes. A note on sourcing before we start. This episode draws on reporting from WBAL-TV, CBS News Baltimore, WMAR, 2 News, Fox Baltimore, court records from the Maryland Court of Special Appeals, and statements from Phylicia's family. Where facts are disputed or where a legal outcome is final versus still contested, I will tell you clearly. This case has one of the most complicated legal histories we've ever covered on this show, so stay with me. Let's talk about who Phylicia was. Phylicia Barnes was 16 years old. She was an honor student from Monroe, North Carolina, described by people who knew her as driven, thoughtful, and full of plans for her future. In December of 2010, during her winter break from high school, Phylicia traveled to Baltimore, Maryland to visit her older half-sister, Dina Barnes. It was supposed to be a short, ordinary holiday visit. It became the last time her family would ever see her alive. Here's the last known moment. On the 28th of December 2010, Phylicia was reported missing from her sister's apartment in Northwest Baltimore. She had told people around her she planned to go to the mall that day. She never returned. There was no trace of her, no confirmed sighting, no accounts of where she'd gone after that morning. Baltimore City Police and the FBI joined the search almost immediately, given her age and the fact that she was from out of state. In the earliest days of the investigation, attention turned toward a man named Michael Maurice Johnson. Johnson was an adult who had been dating Phylicia's half-sister, Dina, and he was reportedly one of the last people known to have contact with Phylicia before she vanished. Witnesses told police they saw Johnson moving a large plastic storage tub out of the apartment on the same day Phylicia went missing. That detail, the tub, became one of the central, haunting pieces of this case. Police named Johnson an early suspect, though it would take months of searching before there was any resolution to what actually happened to Phylicia. In April of 2011, nearly 4 months after she disappeared, Phylicia's body was recovered from the Susquehanna River near the Conowingo Dam, roughly 40 miles northeast of Baltimore. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner ruled her death a homicide, determining the cause of death to be asphyxiation. Baltimore City Police announced Johnson's arrest in connection with her death. What followed was one of the most drawn-out legal battles in Maryland criminal court history, and if you take one thing away from the legal side of this episode, it's this. This case cycled through multiple trials, multiple verdicts, and multiple reversals over the better part of a decade, and even now, no one has ever been finally convicted of killing Phylicia Barnes. Let's walk through it carefully, because the sequence matters. Johnson was formally indicted in 2012. At his first trial in 2013, a jury acquitted him of first-degree murder but convicted him of second-degree murder. For a moment, it looked like the case had reached a resolution. It hadn't. That conviction was overturned after the defense successfully argued a Brady violation, meaning prosecutors had failed to turn over evidence favorable to the defense, which is a constitutional requirement. A new trial was ordered. The second trial ended differently, with a mistrial. The jury could not reach a unanimous verdict, and under Maryland law, a mistrial is treated as though no trial happened at all, which matters. because it set up the next several years of legal wrangling over whether Johnson could be tried again without violating double jeopardy protections. At one point, a circuit court judge actually granted a judgment of acquittal, effectively ending the case, but that decision was later challenged. The Maryland Court of Special Appeals ultimately ruled that the circuit court did not have the jurisdiction to grant that acquittal after a mistrial, reversed the decision, and cleared the way for the state to pursue yet another trial. Baltimore's state's attorney at the time, Marilyn Mosby, said publicly that her office intended to keep pursuing justice for Phylicia's family. Johnson faced a third trial. This time, a judge, not a jury, acquitted him of the murder charge. That acquittal, delivered by a judge in a bench ruling, closed the door on the criminal case against Michael Johnson for Phylicia Barnes' murder. Under the law, that's the end of it. He cannot be tried again for her death. As of this recording, no one has ever been convicted of killing Phylicia Barnes, and her case, from a homicide prosecution standpoint, remains legally unresolved. For years after that, Phylicia's family said publicly that they felt the system had failed their daughter. Wading through 4 separate criminal proceedings, only to end with an acquittal, is its own form of trauma, on top of losing a 16-year-old girl in the first place. Now here's where this case takes a turn that's important to this show, because it's the most recent major development, and it happened just this year. In the years following his acquittal, Michael Johnson, now in his 40s, was charged in an entirely separate case out of Rosedale in Baltimore County. This case had nothing to do with Phylicia Barnes. Prosecutors accused him of a brutal, hours-long attack on a young woman, a rape and assault case in which Johnson was accused of attacking the victim after becoming enraged over a phone conversation she'd had with her sister. According to reporting on the case, the victim suffered severe injuries and eventually got help through a social worker who alerted police. Johnson was arrested at his home. That case went to trial. Johnson chose not to testify in his own defense. The jury reached its verdict after hours of deliberation, guilty on charges including first-degree rape and first-degree assault. He was acquitted of attempted murder in that same case. In June of 2026, Michael Johnson was sentenced in Towson, Maryland for that conviction. 2 consecutive life sentences plus 25 years. Here's the part of this update that connects directly back to Phylicia. Because Johnson had been a longtime suspect in Phylicia's case, even though he was never convicted of her murder, the judge in this unrelated sentencing allowed Phylicia's family to submit victim impact statements. As many as a dozen of her family members filled the courtroom. They were not part of the case being sentenced, but they were given the chance to be heard, and by their own account, it mattered. Phylicia's father, Russell Barnes, said afterward, "A lot of stress has been lifted off. 2 words. Thank God." Her mother, Janice Mustafa, said, "My sweet Simone, Phylicia's family nickname, can rest in peace that this monstrous beast is off the streets." Her cousin, Harry Watson, thanked Baltimore County for what he called finally bringing this person to justice, while pointedly noting that Baltimore City's handling of the original case, in his words, flat out just failed this family. Baltimore County State's Attorney Scott Schellenberger acknowledged the connection directly, saying his office knew how much this victory would mean to the Barnes family, not necessarily closure, in his words, but knowing that Johnson will never be able to do this to anyone else again. Johnson did not speak when given the opportunity at sentencing. Family members said he showed no emotion and did not make eye contact with them when his sentence was read. So where does that leave Phylicia's case, 16 years later, legally still unresolved? No one has ever been convicted of her murder, and under the law, Michael Johnson cannot be retried for it after his acquittal. What her family has now is not a murder conviction. It's the knowledge that the man who was, for over a decade, the central figure tied to their daughter's disappearance will spend the rest of his life in prison for what he did to someone else. For a family who has said for 16 years that the system failed them, that's the closest thing to relief they've been given. Phylicia Barnes was 16 years old. She was an honor student with a future ahead of her, visiting family for the holidays. Her story is a reminder of how long a family can wait for even a partial sense of justice, and how a case can move through the entire machinery of the criminal justice system without ever fully answering the question of who is responsible. If you have any information related to Phylicia Barnes's case, you're encouraged to contact the Baltimore Police Department. That's this episode of The Last Known Moment. Thank you for kicking off season 2 with us. If this case moved you, share it, and if you haven't already, follow Natural Queen 77 TV wherever you're listening. We'll be back next week with another case that deserves to be remembered. Until then, take care of each other.